Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey there, this is James Valvis coming at you with a new Freeform number 22. This is the kind of talk I give. It's the laziest one, where I just begin to spout about things that are on my mind. And today on my mind is Senator John McCain. Now, Senator John McCain, a little history here. I voted for Senator McCain against Barack Obama in 2008. I did this reluctantly to some degree. I did not support McCain in the primaries. I did not like the fact that he won the nomination. I did not like his temperament. I did not like most of his policies. I did not like his attitude toward many things. I did not like his weaselly positions on important matters like abortion. I did not like the fact that he regularly bucked his party, not so much, I don't think, out of principle, but out of spite or out of an attempt to make himself wider known and to put himself in the news cycle. He did this repeatedly. He did it over and over again. But I still voted for him because Senator Barack Obama was, to me, a clearly terrible choice for president. Not only was he inexperienced, but he was deified in all the wrong ways by the left. He had shown bad associations and bad judgment in his associations. He had done almost nothing as a legislator and almost nothing prior to being a legislator. He had gotten a position as a teacher, but so had a lot of other people. It doesn't qualify you to be president of the United States because you taught law, especially since we all know that many African Americans in that position or those positions receive their positions not because of the quality of their work, but because of their racial identity. There are exceptions to that, of course. No one can fault on the left, take somebody on the left, a Thurgood Marshall, who was a brilliant legal mind, or nobody can fault someone like Clarence Thomas, who on the right is a brilliant legal mind. No one can fault someone like a Thomas Sowell, who is a brilliant economic and social commentator who's black. You can't fault every black and say every black got their positions because of that. But when you look out and you see that there's little to hold up a person's qualifications in the legal field, except for the fact that he graduated to get a legal degree, and then he immediately moved into academia, when he has no legal accomplishment outside of that, then you say that raises question marks about his ability to function as a lawyer. So anyway, all these problems stirred up and made me hold my nose and grit my teeth and pull the lever for John McCain. Today, I would not pull the lever for John McCain. I would not vote in that election at all. I would find those two completely unpalatable choices. I wouldn't like either one of them, and I simply wouldn't waste my time voting for either of those men. Neither man would justify me voting for them. I do not see anything wrong with not voting. I spent a long period of my life not voting when I didn't think that the candidates were all that good or different or interesting or said things that I cared about. And so I just doesn't bother me not to vote. I think this idea, everybody has to vote. If you don't vote, you're not a civic minded, you don't care about it. That's not true. It's not true at all. It's like all these people who say, oh, if you voted for Jill Stein, you cost Hillary the election. No, you didn't. You wanted Jill Stein, you should have voted for Jill Stein. It's exactly what you should do. You should vote for the person. You should always vote your conscience. You should vote for what you think is right. You should never vote just for practical matters. You should never do anything like that when it comes to that kind of thing because it's expedient. Because it's like, if Hitler and Stalin were running, would you vote for one or the other? Would you? I wouldn't. I wouldn't vote for either of them, or I'd vote for somebody else. So no, I would not vote for McCain today, nor would I vote for Obama. I would find both of those extremely unpalatable. But if you ask me which of the two I find more unpalatable, it's a hard choice. Because I don't have abortion to go. Usually abortion is the deciding factor for me. But do I think that John McCain would have done anything to stop abortion? No, I think he might have hurt it. He might have even gone the other way. Do I think he would have appointed Supreme Court nominees that would have been better toward? No, I don't think so. I think we would have gotten, at the best we could have hoped for would be somebody like Kennedy, and Kennedy was a huge abortion supporter. So no, I don't think that there was no reason for me to vote for John McCain. That's just in a political sense. Now let's talk about him as an individual. Let's talk about John McCain as an individual. And I realize he just died. And so you're supposed to say all kinds of nice things about the guy who just died. You know what? No, I'm sorry. You don't suddenly become a saint because you died. You don't suddenly, your life, if anything, dying should calcify our opinions about people because now they can't change. We should be more magnanimous to the living because the living have an opportunity to change their ways. But the dead, they can't do anything. They're dead. They've run their race and it's over, and now we know about them. Hitler will always be Hitler. He can't do anything to change it. He can't decide, he can't come out and say, I'm truly repentant of what I did and I'm sorry about it. He can't do anything like that. He's gone. He made his choices and they are set in history. And that's true of John McCain. So I didn't like him while he was alive and what he was doing, and I sure as don't like him now that he's dead. Let's talk a little bit about him. All right, this is a guy who never met a war he did not like. Never. I name one. Name a war that John McCain was even reticent about. Even one. Name a single thing that he ever said and looked at and said, I'm not entirely sure about this war. Iraq? Nah. Afghanistan? Nah. Libya? Nah. He was for going into Syria. He said, bomb Iran. There's no doubt in my mind that if John McCain had gotten elected, we would have gone to war with Iran. We'd have gone to war with Syria. We might have gone to war with Russia. This guy was not a warmonger. He was a war whore. He loved war. And the thing about it is, he thought he had the right to love war. Now, Americans, no matter what political philosophy or what political side we're on, Americans don't generally like war. Conservatives, liberals or progressives, I don't like calling them liberals, they're not liberal. Progressives don't like war at all. They think war is never the answer. War is not the answer. Whatever the question is, war is not the answer. War is terrible. That, of course, I think it's foolish. There are times when war is the answer. There are times when war has to be the answer. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. The conservative answer is just that. War is a horrible thing. It's hell, and it should never be entered into lightly, but sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes you have to fight. You're not left any choice. You have to fight. That's the conservative answer. But both of those sides are reticent to fight a war. Both of those sides don't like war. There's something we agree on. It's one of the few touchstones Americans have, is that we don't like war. We've never liked war. It's why we got into World War I so late. It's why we got into World War II so late. It's why Vietnam still rings in the heads of every American, because we don't like war. We like to make money. We like to create culture. We like to drive around in our minivans. We like to have peace and prosperity. We're generally not a war-like people. There are reasons for that. And they have to do with the fact that, generally speaking, we like our neighbors, or we have it up to this point in history. We like Mexico, and we like Canada, but we also like the people in the next state over. And when we fight when the Washington Huskies play the Oregon Ducks. That's how we fight. That's how we come across our differences, and we take all our competitiveness and our animosity toward one another, and we put it toward our football teams, and then we go out there and we either beat their asses or we go home depressed. But either way, that's how we do it. We're not a war-happy people. John McCain was a war-happy person, and John McCain thought that he could be a war-happy person because supposedly he was a war hero. He was a person who had been to war and who had suffered in war and had been a war prisoner, and therefore he could not be questioned about war. Now, the reason he could think this is because the left has made two mistakes when it comes to our soldiers in modern times. The first is the whole baby killer thing. The left, after Vietnam or during Vietnam, the later parts of Vietnam and right after Vietnam, a few years after it, were absolutely horrendous to our soldiers. Now, our soldiers are innocent people. All right, they sign up to defend the country, and then they go and do the things that our elected leaders tell them to do. That is their job. Their job is not to question those decisions. The American people vote for the leaders that they vote for, and those leaders make decisions, and we send these young men, and occasionally, very seldom, women, over to fight on our behalf. But they themselves are completely innocent of these decisions. They are simply doing what they're told to do. And you can say, oh, they shouldn't do what they're told to do. That is not their place. Their place is to defend the body politic of America. If you don't like the decisions that a leader makes, well, you will either change that leader or whatever. But that is entirely not the place of the military. Theirs is not to question why. Theirs is just to do and die. That's what they do. I should say that's what we do, because I was one of them. Okay? So you can't really fault them for anything. You can't. But these leaders, the leaders, but the left did. The left blamed these innocent men. That's where you get the whole Rambo thing. They come home and they're treated like crap. They're called baby killer and all kinds of crap like that. And they're spit on. And yes, they were spit on, some of them. And they were treated like garbage. And they came home with their PTSD and all kinds of crap that they'd seen, and they were treated horribly. And they were forgotten about and treated horribly. Treated like, because some people over there, did a my-lie or something like that, did a few war crimes. Every one of them were treated as if they, and John Kerry had a lot to do with that. He came home and said, oh, they put the electrodes on them, and it's like every soldier was doing that. And so, of course, these people were absent. They were mistreated, they were slandered, they were shunned, and it was a despicable display by the American left. And they had every business to be ashamed by it. But by the 80s, they had come to their senses to some degree. And movies like Platoon and things like that began to make them feel a certain guilt over how these men were treated. And so they went the other way. Because they had overreacted on one side, they swung over to the other side. And the right was always on the other side either, which became the deification of the American soldier. Where once you were a Vietnam vet, you became something of, you couldn't be questioned. Or if you had been a war vet, you couldn't be ever, just in any way abused or even questioned when it came to war, or your courage, or your goodness, or your decency. You could never, ever go after somebody like a John McCain, because he had this buffer around him, this shield that allowed him to be whatever he wanted to be, and could not be questioned because he had been mistreated or been a war prisoner. And so he used this. Of course he used this. Any politician would probably be stupid not to use it. But he used it in horrendous ways. He backed war after war after war. Never was there a guy who loved war as much as this guy. I mean, it's insane. It's insane how much he loved war. For a guy who had been there and experienced it. Let me tell you something. He wasn't the most heroic guy in war either. Not only was he shot down, okay, he was shot down, and then he he turned over information to his captors. So this wasn't a guy. He wasn't a complete coward, but his heroism is greatly exaggerated. Greatly exaggerated. Many men were more heroic than John McCain in our lives. You look at a guy like Audie Murphy. Now that was a guy who was a hero. When you think of certain men, there's a reason John McCain never won, the Medal of Honor. There's a reason for that. He didn't deserve one. He didn't deserve it. There's a reason why he got, certain, he didn't win these kinds of things. And he wasn't that much of a war hero. But let's give him that. Let's give him a certain amount of courage. All right. And I say, he has no more courage than anybody else who joined the military and happened to end up in war. Now remember, everybody who joins the military, every single person who joins the military, you're talking about millions of people now, they take this risk. They know that they can go to war and that they could die there, or they can be captured and tortured. They all know this. It's not something that is hidden. Everybody knows that you can be killed or maimed or tortured or go through great psychological distress while you're in the military. They don't lie to you this. They tell you over and over again in all kinds of ways, in basic training and in all kinds of, and you see it in movies, and you shouldn't be surprised by this. So the idea that one guy in the military goes through this and another guy doesn't, there's not a greater degree of bravery from one to the next. Now you can say, okay, he demonstrated more bravery because a lot of other guys would have quit, or they would have turned themselves in or something, or they would have run scared. I don't think that's true. Most of the people in the military are pretty brave individuals. I know them, and it's just not the case. So I don't hold him in a greater regard because he went through trauma. I don't hold him in greater regard. I don't hold him in greater regard than anybody else who served. Okay, you served your country, you served it honorably. Yes, you turned when they tortured you, but I'm not going to hold that against you. Anybody can do that. It doesn't show a great deal of bravery on your part, but it's okay, that happened. Who's to know that under torture I might not break? Nobody can know that. So I'm not going to hold that for you, but I'm not going to hold you up for it too overly much. Now, here's the thing about any kind of accomplishment that I want to talk to you about here a little bit. I'll get back to John McCain in a little bit and why I still think, as we go along, as he went along, he had not shown great bravery other than this. But, take a college student. A college student goes to college and he gets a degree, okay? He or she goes to college and they get a degree. Now, we know that, so I don't forget the percentage, but it's a high percentage. Something like 80% of college degree holders never read a book again in their lives. They never read another book as long as they live, okay? Now, what college? So a person who doesn't read for like 40 or 50 years, can you really call that person educated? And yet we do. We call that person, we say, this person went to college, therefore they know college things. Well, most people go to college. I don't remember a thing. I don't remember a thing from high school. I'll be honest with you, just about almost nothing that I learned from high school do I remember, except the stuff that I've continued to relearn over and over again. So maybe some things, but not a whole lot. But we still say a college-educated person. What a college-education person proved is that they have demonstrated that they are capable of learning. That's what they've shown. They've not shown that they are in a state of permanent knowledge now that they've accomplished college. That's not what it shows. It doesn't show that. It's like I used to run marathons when I was young, okay, and I was extremely fit. I had less than 4% body fat. I could run a mile in 4 minutes and 38 seconds, which is pretty good for a 5'9" guy. And so that's very good. So it's all fine. Now I'm almost 50 years old. I'm fat. I couldn't run a mile at all, probably without having a heart attack. And it's the idea that, so you don't get to stay in this permanent state of marathon runner. You lose it over time. And the same is true for something like courage. John McCain showed that he had the potential to be courageous. And he was courageous in that particular moment. I'll give that to him. I'll give him that he was courageous in the particular moment that when he was asked he could be released because he was a high-ranking guy. His dad had been an admiral and his grandfather had been an admiral, and they offered to release him, and he said, "No, I'm not leaving until my other guys leave." And that's kind of a courageous thing to do. Okay, good for you. But that does not mean that because he was courageous in that moment and at that time, that he remained courageous 40, 50 years later, or in his case, 60 years later. And we don't see that. We don't see a permanent case of courage from John McCain. What we see instead is a slow, sometimes not that slow, descent into abject pettiness, bad temper, and cowardice. We see a person who has become corrupt. He was corrupt down to his core by the end of his life. And I say that knowing, look, his daughter penned a beautiful eulogy to him. I read it. I thought it was just beautifully done. It's a very nice thing. I don't like to say bad things about people's loved ones who just died. It's unlikely she'll ever hear this anyway. But the idea that this guy was all she said, that's what looking from a daughter's eyes. You look up to your dad. I get it. Look, my dad beat the hell out of me. He was a drunk. He cheated on my mother. Did all kinds of horrible things. He's still my dad. I love him. I get it. But this guy was not a good guy. In the last 10 years of his life, he is beyond he's a bad force in the world. He was a bad force before then with his support of the wars over and over again. There's always his war hawking, his always wanting to fight, his pugnacious attitude, his ability to be the gang of this and the gang of that, where he was always turning on conservatives. He was always doing it for self-aggrandizement and to make himself popular among the media. He'd always done that. His lack of temperament. He talks about Trump. This guy had no temperament at all. He was everything. All he ever did was get red in the face. He was angry at everybody. But what he did in the last 10 years of his life has been absolutely stunning. And sometimes this happens to a person who gets rejected. Look, the American people rejected him for Barack Obama. They said no. Well, they rejected him for George W. Bush, and then they rejected him for Barack Obama. Sort of like Hillary Clinton. First they rejected him for she was rejected for Obama, and then they rejected her for Trump. And you see a similar kind of they're very similar people. They're both angry, bitter, nasty people who thought they were entitled, got the nomination based on they've been around a while, and lost elections that were eminently winnable. So just some small things. I don't want to go through a long spiel here. If you want to go through a long spiel and you don't mind a little cursing, I will put a link below to a guy who absolutely just utterly destroys John McCain. And he's quite humorous and he's quite impassioned. And he says that McCain was a one-man case for term limits, and I think that he's right. John McCain. This is just some of the stuff. By the way, his name is the Rageaholic, and his stick is to be very angry, and he talks very angry thing. I don't think he's really an angry guy; it's just a stick. But John McCain did so many bad things in the last 10 years. Here are just some off the top of my head. The very first thing is he turned on Sarah Palin. Now, I don't know, Sarah Palin probably wasn't a very good choice by him. That's his fault. That was his fault. He thought he was going to fool the electorate into thinking that he was somehow a conservative, a true principled conservative, by putting Sarah Palin on the ticket. But the fact of the matter is, that was just show. This guy never had a conservative bone in his body, except for the fact that he loves war. I mean, I don't think that's conservative either. I think it's the exact opposite of conservative. So I think neocons are not really conservatives. They should be called neoliberals. They are neo-progressives. They're or maybe some kind of war progressives or something like that. They're not in any way. He was not in any way conservative. If you look at his some of the things, maybe guns, I don't know, but there was never a time when he wasn't willing to betray the conservative cause. There wasn't a time when he thought, oh, we'll always compromise, and we always compromise down. We never compromise. We never say like, oh, well, let's find a way to compromise on abortion. No, it's always, let's find a way to compromise on Obamacare. So we'll get this. And so it's always something like that, and if he thought, I'll tell you this too, Obamacare, if he thought, I think at the very beginning, if Obamacare was going to fail and they needed one vote from a Republican, he would have been that vote. I think there would have been a few of them who would have been that vote. I think, in Maine or, Alaska, those swing votes there, I think that they would have passed Obamacare anyway. The reason they did, a lot of times these Republicans, they'll vote against something knowing that they're safe, knowing that it's going to pass anyway. McCain did that often. So you say, oh, but he had this great record for conservative votes. Now, if you look at the closed votes, you look at the things that mattered, he was always on the other side. He was always he was a liberal in sheep's clothing. He really was. He was a progressive. At heart, he was a progressive, running as a conservative. He was a snake in the grass when it comes to conservative values, which shows why, that's why he hates anybody who really, does conservative, except for the whole war thing. It was usually on the right when it came to war issues, but everything else, military spending, that kind of thing. So, what else did he do besides turn on, Sarah Palin? Let me tell you, that's not a small betrayal. When you pull somebody into your ticket and you put them in a national spotlight and they take that kind of abuse and they continue to take that kind of abuse a decade later, and for you to say that that person was a mistake, that is no small betrayal. That must have hurt Sarah Palin quite a bit. I can imagine that really, really hurt. It really, what it shows is your bad judgment. It's more than it shows her. She is who she is. She knows what she knows, and she is who she is, and she's the kind of person she is. And if you didn't see that, then that shows something about you. That says something about you more than it says about her. I think that she was extremely loyal to this jerkwad who never really defended her. And I think ultimately she probably felt like, I haven't even seen anything from her. I'm sure she tweeted out something about, oh, what a shame he's dead. But I don't think that you see a whole lot of mourning from Miss Palin. So the second thing he did is he was direct. Well, these are not in order, not chronological order, but I'm going to put them out there. John McCain said that Rand Paul was working for Vladimir Putin. Now, Rand Paul, R-A-N-D, the senator from Kentucky. Now, Rand Paul is one of the most decent men in public service. He really is. He is absolutely faithful to the Constitution. It's one of the reasons why he gets so much abuse. Because this is a guy who the neocons on the right and the neoliberals on the left can't stand. He doesn't like war. He doesn't like going against the Constitution. He'll defend Trump when he deserves it, and he's just an all-around great guy. I mean, this guy has been attacked over and over again, and I'm not just talking about attacked verbally, as McCain did, but he's been attacked physically. They actually put him in a hospital. Why? I don't know. The guy has never been anything but decent. He's a physician who has helped all kinds of people. He lives in a regular house. He's just a genuine good public servant. And there's never been even a bad word said about Rand Paul in his personal life. It's all been, he's a Nazi or something garbage like that. So for John McCain to say that Rand Paul was a Russian agent and he was working for Vladimir Putin because this guy doesn't want to go to war with Syria is absolutely horrendous. It is absolutely just a despicable way to treat a fellow senator. You're basically accusing him of treason. And that is beyond the pale. This is the hothead McCain. He did this kind of stuff over and over again. He was never, ever a good guy. He wasn't a good guy to his fellow senators. He wasn't a good guy to the people he ran with. He wasn't a good guy to anybody. He was an asshole, plain and simple. He was an asshole. What else did he do? Oh boy. Yeah, what else did he do? What else did he do? Let's talk about a little bit about his first marriage, because that's an important time to talk about. All right, here's the situation. His first wife, he waited for him while he was a prisoner of war, and he was prisoner of war for a long time, about 5 years. So God bless him for that. Not an easy thing to do, to lose 5 years of your life being treated like that. So no one can fault him for that. But then she waited for him. She was in an accident, car accident, and it was devastating. She almost died from it, and she actually lost a couple of inches in height and put on some weight because she had been in this terrible accident. And then he came home, and she had been waiting for him. He came home. He found this woman. He was something of a little bit of a celebrity because he'd been this prisoner of war, and he found this shorter, dumpier, less attractive wife than he left, and all of a sudden there began to be problems within the marriage. And I'm going to read you this paragraph from Wikipedia because it's very telling. During their time in Jacksonville, the McCain's marriage began to falter. McCain had extramarital affairs. Affairs. He had multiple affairs. He was seen with other women in social settings and developed a reputation among colleagues for womanizing. So he's sleeping around on his wife terribly. Some of the McCain's activities with other women occurred when he was off duty after routine flights to Marine Corps Air Station Yuma and Naval Air Facility El Centro. McCain later said, "My marriage's collapse was attributable to my own selfishness and immaturity more than it was to Vietnam, and I cannot escape blame by pointing the finger at the war. The blame was entirely mine." His wife, Carol, later stated that the failure was not due to her accident or Vietnam, and that "I attribute more to John's turning 40 and wanting to be 25 again than I do to anything else." And his biographer, Robert Timberg, believes that Vietnam did play a part, but probably not a major part. It's more like a walk-on. Anyway, then he excuses it a little bit. So I give him some kind of credit for taking some kind of blame, but it doesn't change the fact that this woman who waited for him and who was in an accident and was the mother of his children and had suffered a great deal, both waiting for him and being sad. Remember, she waited for him for years, not knowing if he was alive, her life not going on. She could have been with somebody else. And instead, she waited for him. And he came home and he fucked around on her multiple times, including with the woman he would eventually remarry, which was his wife until he died, which was Cindy McCain. He was cheating on his first wife with her as well. So this, you could say, well, look, we're all human. We all make mistakes, but it doesn't speak well of the man that this kind of thing was going on. So let's go on to other things. What'd he do? Let's just talk about it. Oh boy, let me count the ways. The piss dossier, the infamous piss dossier, the fake charge that Trump went to Russia and had Russian hookers peeing on him for sexual gratification, which was complete garbage and made up and had nothing to do with reality at all. John McCain paid for that. That was John McCain opposition research. He built that. He built the whole Russian conspiracy thing personally. That's why he was calling Rand Paul working for Vladimir Putin, because he wanted to go to war with Syria. That's why. Because he wanted to do that, and Rand Paul didn't, and Donald Trump didn't. Now, Hillary Clinton did. That's why John McCain was a Hillary Clinton supporter. But those other guys didn't. And so he was working opposition research. Now remember, he's not running for anything. He's not running. He wasn't running for president. I mean, his friend was running. Lindsey Graham was running, but he had 4 votes, 2 of which were John McCain. He had no support at all. But he was running opposition research on a guy that had nothing to do with his own campaign. Nothing at all. He was doing it out of spite because he didn't like the guy's political opinions. He paid for it. What money he paid for it? I don't know. Probably Senate money. Probably he went to the CIA and used the government levers to do opposition research on the president, the candidate Trump, then candidate Trump. He used the CIA and the levers of government to do this in opposition of all campaign law. He did this in order to stop Donald Trump so that he could have his war with Syria, one last war before he signed off into the night. Because that's who John McCain was. That's the kind of guy he was. And when Trump came out and said, I like war heroes who don't get captured, he knew what was going on. That's why he took his shot at McCain. Because he understood that John McCain was the one pushing all this stuff. He understood that. He knew it. He knew who was behind it. He knew who was the never Trumper who was doing all this garbage. That's why he attacked him on the thing he was most invulnerable to. He went after his military service because he could, because he had to, because he wanted to put a question in everything that McCain was putting forward, and he knew that McCain was protected by the shield of this idea that he had been a hero. And so Trump tried to take that down, tried to take the shield down, because he had to, because it was the only way he could survive politically, because this guy was coming after him with slanderous lies. McCain was a bad human being. He was a bad guy. He was not a hero. Like I said, maybe he was when he served this country in uniform. That's an open question. You can say, well, he gave research, or he gave information to the enemy. I'm willing to forgive that. I think a lot of people are willing to forgive that when they know that somebody's been tortured and they've been mistreated. A lot of people are willing to forgive that. But it doesn't speak well of him. It doesn't make us say, oh, this was a guy who to the very end stood by his country. It wasn't that. But even if you give him the benefit of the doubt there, it's not just, a life isn't just one moment, or it isn't just a couple of years. A life is a full life. When you live to be 80 something years old, 82 or however old he was when he died, that's a long life. And you're not judged merely on one moment in that when you're a young man. You're not. You're judged on the entirety of your life. On all of it. When I think of heroic, remember this guy, you want to talk about a heroic person, let's talk about Martin Luther King. And remember, John McCain fought tooth and nail. He fought tooth and nail to deny that man getting a holiday. That's who he was. He eventually apologized to it when he was running for president because he wanted to pick up an extra percentage of black vote. But for the most part, this is a guy, when it was politically convenient, fought tooth and nail against. He was the guy who was saying, absolutely not. This guy doesn't deserve his own holiday. But if you want to talk about a man of courage, there's one. Martin Luther King. There was never a time when he was not courageous. He was courageous every day of his life. He started courageous, he ended courageous. Therefore, you can call him a courageous man. But John McCain, was he courageous? Did he take the courageous steps in life? If you're on the left today, you say so because you hate Donald Trump. You hate Donald Trump and you say, oh, the only good Republican is a dead Republican. And John McCain is dead and he hated Donald Trump, therefore he's good. Donald Trump is, when Donald Trump dies, if he says something bad about the guy who's president now, they'll say Donald Trump was a good guy. Because that's the way the left is. They don't really have any values. They just have political wants and needs. That's it. The same people who called John McCain a racist, and I don't think he was a racist. He was just a political opportunist. But the same people who called John McCain a racist in 2008, today cannot celebrate his life enough. And it's all because they see it as a political advantageous thing. It has nothing to do with John McCain. It has everything to do with them. But John McCain? No, a bad guy. Was he as bad as Obama? In some ways, he was worse. He certainly liked war a lot more than Obama. I don't think Obama really cared for war. I don't think he would even have gone to war with Libya if it wasn't for Hillary Clinton. I think she talked him into it. So I can give Obama that. I don't think he was a warmonger. I don't think he really, he didn't want to extend American power at all, if you ask me, to some degree at all. I mean, not even politically, not even diplomatically. He didn't want he didn't want his own power, he liked, but the American power, no. So yeah, John McCain, he was a hero once in his life, but he did not lead a heroic life. those are two different things. Those are two different things. If you look at someone like St. Peter, St. Peter was a guy who had a moment of cowardice when he denied Christ 3 times. But then he went on to lead a heroic and courageous life, and eventually was crucified in Rome upside down, because our blessed Lord required that of him. That's ultimately a courageous life. He started off somewhat cowardly and grew into his courage. John McCain was the opposite. He started off somewhat courageous and became ever more a scumbag. He started off somewhat heroic and became ever more the sniveling little coward who hid behind a piss dossier and called decent Americans traitors for merely disagreeing with him on matters of war and peace. This is not a man to be celebrated. I'm sorry, he's not. He's a man to be shunned. He will lie in state, and a bunch of dignitaries will sit around and talk about how wonderful he was. It always happens. But, they did the same thing for Stalin. Not that John McCain was Stalin. I'm just saying he was, he wasn't that bad. But almost nobody is. But yeah, a bunch of dignitaries sat around and talked about the great glories of Stalin as well. Doesn't make him a good man. Doesn't. This was a guy who should have been out of the Congress a long time ago. And he only moved to Arizona because he was a carpetbagger, because he thought he could advance his career. I don't know if he married for that, but his marriage certainly helped his career as well. He never really cared about any conservative moral values. The best you could say about him is that he seemed to have a genuine affection for, his own, the Constitution and that kind of thing, at least within the framework of a historical framework. But that's the best I can say about him. There isn't a whole lot there. You look at his legislative accomplishments, you look at the things that he did, McCain-Feingold and all that. I just don't see a lot there. I don't see, this is a guy, we also forget, he was ridden with scandal with the financial stuff. The name's eluding me at the moment, but he almost, got thrown out of the Senate over it. He almost got impeached over it. And so this is, not a good guy. He's a guy who, over the next few days, everybody will talk about how wonderful and what a great maverick he was and what an independent thinker. He wasn't any of that. And what a hero he was and how courageous he was. And if he was that for a very short time in his life, and then never was that again. And so, I'm sorry I voted for him. It's one of the very few votes that I regret. I voted for Michael Dukakis, and I don't regret that vote. I voted for, Al Gore, and I don't really regret that vote. I was making the best decisions I could at the time. But John McCain, yeah, I should have never voted for him. I should have seen it earlier than I did. I shouldn't have voted at all in that election. Or I should have voted in who I really wanted, which was Fred Thompson for president. Or vote for my wife or somebody who is better than just about anybody who's run for president in the last 100 years. And that's all. That's all I got to say about the guy. I hope I never have to talk about him again. I'm glad, I'm never glad that a human being dies, especially when I think that they've died without remorse for for what they've done. But I am glad that he's out of the Senate. I am glad that he will no longer be hurting this country. And I'm glad that, the world is that much closer to peace and prosperity, because this warmonger and this war whore is no longer in the upper body of our Congress. Anyway, thanks for listening. And as always, like I said, I'll leave that link below. And you can check it out if you want. Rage a Hog, he's a very interesting guy. I would not listen to it at work. He has a interesting vocabulary. But I definitely suggest, if you're interested, you can get a greater sense of what I'm talking about here by listening to him. He has links and he has screen captures and all that great stuff that I never do. Okay. As always, again, like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. It's important to me. I very much appreciate it when you do. And as always, thank you for listening, and God bless you.